That signal, I have that yet, but you can have some more of this food.
Hey guys, welcome back to Resistance Chicks. I'm your host. Leah's coming too. So sorry it took us a little bit longer to get everything queued up. But, so what we want to talk about today is, we put in the title, or Leah had me put in the title, Madness in the UK. And it literally is absolute madness. We're going to talk about Lauren Southern. And the fact that she has been literally kept from going into the UK because she's a terrorist. That's what they're saying. They are saying that she's a terrorist and they are not allowed her. I don't know how long she's going to be banned from entering into the UK. I don't know the ins and outs on that. But there was another couple, Martin Sellner and Brittany Pettibone, who were also supposed to go into the UK. I know that Martin wanted to speak at the Speaker's Corner, which is historically like anybody who is anybody. It doesn't matter your religious beliefs can speak there. Karl Marx spoke there. Lenin spoke there. It really doesn't matter. So I am finding that I'm really, really disappointed. The fact that the United Kingdom is allowing the ideology of the European Union and Angela Merkel to censor people. And one of our viewers who wanted to remain anonymous had asked me to ask you guys, our UK viewers, to contact your MPs. Because as this viewer said, the United States is the UK's biggest, one of the UK's biggest allies. And if the UK is going to start censoring whether the anybody that just wants to speak can enter into the United Kingdom, just literally, you can't come in, you're a terrorist. If they're going to start labeling every person that wants to come into the United Kingdom as a terrorist, they are sending a massive message, not only to the United States, but to the rest of the world. If you do not play by our rules, you can't come into our country, which I find to be incredibly ironic. Trump had this travel ban, right, that banned people temporarily from coming into the United States from 7 of the 7 countries to protect Americans for legitimate reasons, because people in those countries are known to be terrorists. They do commit terror type crimes. So the fact that everybody looked at Trump all over the world and said, how dare you ban these 7 countries temporarily while we can vet and rethink the whole process there. How dare you say that these people can't come in to our country? I found it to be really ironic that now Martin Sellner and Brittany Pettibone and Lauren Southern are now being told that they can't come into the United Kingdom strictly because of the things that they say, because of the views that they hold. So we're going to play the interview with Tommy and Lauren, and then we're going to get to some Nigel Farage stuff. But while we are waiting, I want to briefly go ahead and play this meeting that, I'm not going to play the whole thing, it's 15 minutes long, that Tommy had with this couple, Martin Sellner and Brittany Pettibone, about why they weren't allowed into the country. So let me know. I'm not going to expand this completely big because I want you guys to tell me how the volume is.
Spokesman for Generation Identity, and I'm also sat with Brittany Pettibone, who is
make sure that you guys can hear it okay. Oh, and I didn't, hang on, I know you can hear it, but I didn't switch over to the right scene.
They tried to travel to the UK
I did.
3 days ago. Upon their arrival, they were held, they were arrested, and they've spent 3 days in a detention centre before being deported. I want to sit here now and find out exactly what happened during that ordeal and the
I'm not getting sound. Are you guys getting sound?
Good now. Happy
Is it
to be
muted?
back in Austria.
Absolutely, we're fine.
Always with the
Explain to
sound
me
with
what
me.
exactly happened from the minute you landed.
Yeah, we landed, and at passport control I was hold. The guy asked me if I've ever was hold there before, and he said it's just a matter of a few minutes. But this was the beginning
See.
of a 3 days detention. Actually, they found Brittany. We were separated. We're not allowed to look on our phones, not allowed to talk. And then they put us on hold there. They searched our bags, and we spent the whole day there. And
Oh.
the night they brought us into a
I had
detention
to turn
center.
it. That's what it was.
We had to stay till Sunday, separated, unable to communicate it, and actually treated like criminals.
First time you saw each other then was when you were released.
At the detention center, there was a time you could go to there was like a visitor center, so they brought us separately and we were able to meet and talk, and then we had to return to our quarters. So this was the time.
For the first time we could talk in private again was in the plane back from the UK, and sometimes I really didn't know where she was, she didn't know where I was, and we were in cells locked up with criminals being deported to Eastern Europe, illegals who came to the country illegally, and both of us were handcuffed while we were dragged over the airport, so it was really an interesting experience. Yeah.
Because I walked through the main part of the airport, where everyone is getting their luggage and stuff, and everyone looking at me like you're some kind of criminal. It was embarrassing. I just started laughing.
And what was your intention for coming to the UK?
Yeah, my crime.
Your
And
crime.
Britain's-
Yeah, what is the crime?
Britney's crime was that she wanted to talk with you, and my crime is that I wanted to speak at Speaker's Corner, and even that's a backstory to it, because I was invited the second time by Young Independents, the youth movement of UKIP, to give a speech about freedom of speech at one of their events. And both times they lost the venue because of pressure of Antifa.
So, I wanted to just give you guys a little taste of who these people are, what they look like, what they sound like. At the end of that interview with Tommy, Tommy does something pretty cool. He says, what was your speech? Give me your speech. I will give this speech, I think it's this coming Sunday? I think. And he's going to just go and read it. He's going to read that guy's speech because at Speaker's Corner you should be allowed to say anything. It doesn't matter. They have Muslim imams that go there all of the time, and yet this guy was stopped from going into the country. I think they said to Brittany that actually her crime was worse because when she was being interviewed, they asked her what she was going in there for, and she was going to interview Tommy Robinson. And so that's where the Tommy Robinson comes into play. I don't know this couple very well. Leah says she's known of Brittany Pettibone for a while, so I can't get behind them and I can't support them because I don't know them. So I want to make that really, really clear. That doesn't matter, regardless of whether we support them or whether we know them. They should have been allowed to enter the United Kingdom. And the fact that the biggest red flag for them, for the UK, was that she was going to interview Tommy Robinson. Just goes, I mean, he can't leave. They can't kick him out of his own country. They're probably going to try. They've tried jailing him. They just put shoot, oh my gosh, it's escaping my Paul Golding and Jada Franson in jail for a long time.
I want to give a word of advice to the Paul Goldings and the Jada Fransons and the Brittany Pettibones. You've got to allow the Spirit of God to lead you.
True.
Because, and I know we have a lot of atheists and people who get behind these people. Jada and Paul are wonderful people and I love what they do. But they allow their anger to get the best of them a lot of times.
Yeah.
And they get on the front page and they get out there and they do their things and they get in their faces. But sometimes it's better to be stealthy. When you have obvious examples of, free speech violations.
Right.
We make jokes about, British people going making British babies, and we want French people to be French, and we want British people to be British, and we want everybody to be British. But in that, you always have a movement of people. And they call Brittany Pettibone an identitarian and things like that. I know Lauren Southern. I don't know her personally, but I've been following her.
Mhm.
She's not a racist. She says a lot of things. She calls out a lot of people, so I can back her and support her. But I do know the alt-right kind of claim this Brittany Pettibone person, and I disavow the alt-right. And I want to be careful with who we back and support on Resistance Chicks, because if there's in any way anti-Semitic or against certain races or things
I
like
agree.
that, I want to be very careful. And
That being said, that's not what we're doing. Like, a lot of times we will support people and things like that, but that we aren't at all saying these are the best people in the world. Even with Jada Franson and Paul Golding, we never have said we support 100% what they're doing, but what they're doing and the punishment are not equal. So that is something that has to be addressed. There is a specific agenda that is going out after people that are just trying to speak whatever the truth is to them. They're not trying to incite hatred. They're not trying to incite violence. They're not trying to incite an uprising, and that is the difference.
yeah, I mean, like, I was watching Jada Franson, and she stepped over the line to where you're going to lose everyone if you keep on this line of she wants to ban all of Islam. You're not going to, you have to be realistic. You have to watch the way you say things, word things correctly. You don't want to ban Islam. If you're a Christian, you want to show them the love of God.
Right.
You want them
What
to...
was it that Ivan said on IPP TV when we did that interview the other day?
You don't need to ban Islam if Christianity is strong. What you need to be doing is passing out pamphlets on being a strong Christian.
Right.
And that's where all these people
how you'll win.
miss it.
That's how you'll win.
And I love that these guys get out there, and I want to promote free speech and things like that. And we're going to play a couple more videos here. I get behind Tommy because I know his head is on straight. I get behind Lauren, but you've got to the people on the streets, doing the hard interviews, get in the faces, do your thing, but be smart about it. The Bible says that we are wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And if you're going to use Christianity, you've got to use it all the way. You've got to be a Christian, real Christ-like.
Yeah.
You can't just use the Christianity of several hundred.
I want to tell you guys
ago.
something, because Leah came down and she actually hit on something that's really, really powerful. So I want you to take it to heart. But we get a lot of people that come to us and say it just feels hopeless with everything, whatever it is that we're talking about. GMOs, Monsanto, Muslim terrorism, big government, gold and silver, the Fed, whatever it is. It's too big. We can't take it on. We can't handle it. And you know what? You're right. It's huge. You can't take it on. You can't handle it. It will not ever come down. This giant will never, ever come down without the power of God.
Right.
You can't do it without the power of God. That's how our country was founded, with the power of God. So what these people are doing, if they do not have the power of God behind them, it will fail. You have to walk in the Spirit, and you have to have the power of God. Otherwise,
you're
it's just
up
fruitless.
against-
You're just a sounding brass and a tingling cymbal.
You know
as the
your
Bible says.
enemy, and God is with you. God is protecting these people on a level that they don't even understand.
Right.
Tommy's still alive because it's by the grace of God.
Yeah.
Lauren has not been injured and raped by the grace of God.
Yeah.
But you can't push that grace so far.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with the violence that you're dealing with terrorists. You're dealing with people who throw acid in people's faces. You're dealing with people who just
and they're dangerous.
Suddenly your daughter's gone and she's in a kebab somewhere, or you're as Tommy pointed out in Telford, they nailed a 11-year-old girl's tongue to a table and they burned one victim and her whole family in a house fire.
It's demonic is what it is. And
It's
you would
satanic.
never go into, here's the thing, as Christians we have power to cast down or step on serpents and cast out devils in Jesus' name and all of that. You have the power as a Christian to do it.
Right.
But if you aren't a strong enough Christian, you don't enter into the devil's house and try to cast him out, because he will beat you every time.
Atheism will not stop an Islamic invasion.
And so you have to
No matter how
know who you are in
logical you
Christ before you try to take on such a demonic foe.
You can point out their issues,
Absolutely.
and
But if you're
in
going to
that way
literally
you
take
can
them on,
you can stem the tide in some ways, like a Like some of
We're
these.
both fighting over me. Donald Buskey, you get a cookie for that fidget
I'm
pen.
just gonna put it to the side.
But I need it.
No,
It's,
you
I don't even do that sort of thing. It's
So
on you.
I'm gonna play here some of Lauren's video. She was detained under the Terrorism Act.
No, I have been officially banned from the UK for racism. And now I'm stuck in Calais.
You're stuck in Calais. Explain what happened.
Alright, so I was coming in on a bus. I figured Calais would be one of the best places to come through, and I figured that wouldn't be a problem, but much like Brittany Pettibone and Martin Sellner, I was stopped at the border and brought in for questioning. Initially, I figured it would be sort of normal questioning, like what happened to Martin Sellner and Brittany Pettibone, who were detained 2 days before me, where they asked me why I'm going, my political motives, all these sort of things. But once I was put into a detention center after the normal border police had questioned me, I got a knock on the door from the Kent UK police, who handed me this form, and that's where things kind of went sideways. It's the Schedule 7 Terrorism Act, and they said, you need to read this. You are being brought in to be questioned under the Terrorism Act.
Under the Terrorism Act, you wrote here, do not have the right to remain silent. Now, for everyone in Britain, all we ever think is you have the right to remain silent. That's what you get told if you get arrested. You're told you don't have the right to remain silent.
Yeah, I effectively no rights. It's because it's supposed to be to prevent a terrorist attack. They're supposed to take you in if they believe you are going to commit a terrorist attack or you're involved in it in somehow, so you lose all your rights effectively so that they can solve this problem and make sure you don't attack the UK. I
want to pause this for a technical issue. Here's the thing, guys. I don't hear the audio that's being put out. I have to occasionally select to make sure that this microphone is on, because sometimes this software doesn't, and I don't always remember to do it. Somebody left a comment what happened to the microphone. Sometimes the webcam itself has a microphone. If the volume or audio or whatever, video, whatever it is, if you ever see an issue, hear an issue, it just doesn't sound just right, please let me know in the chat so that I can correct it, so we don't go a 2-hour video with it like that. So thank you.
Immediately got up in a tuff saying, like, I want legal representation. I want to be able to make a phone call. Of course, I answered all their questions. I refused to let them in my phone. That was the one thing that I was not cooperative on. And they
Legal representative. They said you couldn't have a meeting.
for the first hour, no. They
First
just get
hour,
to
no.
question me, and then after an hour, if I demand a solicitor, they can still technically say no to the solicitor after the first hour if they think it'll impede with the investigation. So they could just make something up. But they did say, okay, we'll call a solicitor for you after an hour of me being interrogated. And they also called my father after an hour of being interrogated. But I got asked some bizarre questions in that hour in this tiny, really hot room where I'm sitting there like, oh my goodness, I'm being questioned as a terrorist.
On terrorism?
Yeah.
What were they asking you?
So they asked me a manner of questions. It started a little less weird. They asked me about my speech that I gave in Belgium for a Flemish nationalist group. Then they asked me to describe my political ideology. Then they asked me about my religion and asked if I was a Christian extremist, how I would describe my Christianity. And after that, this is where things got really weird. They said, how do you feel about someone driving a car or a truck into a group of people, a group of Muslims?
Look at Tommy's eyes get big right there.
Singled out Muslims. And I literally started laughing in the interview and was like, what? Like, I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I mean, obviously I think that's a horrific thing. Like, generally a pretty bad thing to run a car into a bunch of people. You can check any of my social media, and I've never once supported that. And I even mentioned to them, I said, you're asking me if I'm a Christian, you're asking me if I want to run cars into people, how I feel about that. I think you may have your priorities messed up here. And they turned to me and they said, oh, we have lots of problems with right-wing terrorism here too. We have to investigate everything. How do you feel about right-wing terrorism anyways? Insanity.
Do you think they asked Muslims that are trying to get into Britain? Do you think they pulled into a room and asked, how do you feel about people running over non-Muslims in cars?
Right.
Do you think they're asked that?
No, I think it would be scandalous. Certainly, imagine if it were a Muslim public figure that were going through the border, and they were, and not only that, but banned from the country for quote unquote racism. It would never happen. It would never happen, and we all know it.
The racism, because what's come out is they've said racist material in Luton. Can you explain what that was?
Right. So after about 3 hours of questioning by the police under this terrorism act and a bit of time of break because
So we talked about this in our previous episode, and what she did was hilarious to me. She saw some pamphlets going around that says that Jesus is a homosexual, so she decided to see what would happen if they said Muhammad was a homosexual and that he loves transgenders and blah blah blah. And
but that's a big no-no. Because you can call Jesus a homosexual, but you cannot call Muhammad a homosexual.
Right. Yes, seriously. And you have no rights.
Just to let you know, at the moment, she is being detained. She just wants...
Here is the... listen to this conversation with them and her dad.
I'm calling just with regards to your daughter. Just to let you know, at the moment, she is being detained. She just wants you to know that she is being detained at the moment under a power called Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act. She's just being questioned at the moment. She's all in order. She just thought you'd like to know that where she is.
A terrorism act?
Yes. We're just asking.
He says a terrorism act?
It does. Just so you know, it sounds worse than it is.
He laughs about it.
We suspect her of being a terrorist or anything like that. We have the power here at the port to stop anyone who comes through.
We don't suspect her of being a terrorist. It sounds worse than it is.
But we have the power here to stop anyone that we want.
Given certain criteria, and we can stop and ask some questions with regards to them. And should it pass the hour point during that examination, we then have to detain them and give them their legal.
Oh, anyways.
We then have to give them their legal. So he's admitting. So we're holding her under the Terrorism Act. Imagine what that was like for your dad.
I know. That's why I keep saying I'm the worst daughter on earth. My dad.
And you've done nothing wrong. You've committed no crime, and your father's getting a phone call to say his 22-year-old daughter is being held in Britain, or even in France, by the British under the Terrorism Act. And then he goes on to admit, well, it's okay. She hasn't done anything. We don't suspect her of being a terrorist. We're just completely abusing our power, and no legal representation. I'm shocked by that. I'm shocked that they can allow.
So, Patriot Gallery made a really good point. Isn't this an act of war? To do something like this to Brittany Pettibone is an American citizen. Lauren Southern is a Canadian. Where are the embassies in all of this? Mm-hmm. Where's the United States Embassy? Where's the Canadian Embassy in the UK saying, wait a minute, this is a good citizen. They don't have any priors. They've not incited any riots. They don't preach any sort of terrorism. They are not well-known terrorists. They have no terror links. But in the UK, what you have...
And Martin Sellner is an Austrian because he sounds just like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
In the UK embraces ISIS returnees and cracks down on right-wing journalists. The UK is deeply worried about right-wing journalists, and they are rightly so worried, because you know why? They know that their country is full of a bunch of angry African bees. And if the right-wing journalists come in, they're going to set these African bees. They're not afraid of the right-wing journalists.
I don't know
and what they will do.
That people know breeds of bees, but African bees are extremely violent and very, very
They're well
dangerous.
known to sting you more than any other regular
The only difference
bee.
is that they actually produce a lot of honey.
They do.
And that's why people keep them.
So my point is that these aren't your regular honeybees you're going to stir up. It's a nest of hornets. And what they're afraid of is that these right-wing journalists will knock the hornets.
That's right. That's a better...
Over the weekend, British police detained and barred multiple right-wing personalities from entry into two separate incidences. I told you about that. The police cited the satirical LGBT for Islam flyers Southern handed out last month in Luton as proof she was a bigoted menace. Aren't the British supposed to have some sort of sense of humor? You can walk around probably with a, you know, your pussy hats and everything, but you can't make fun of Islam and LGBTs. The UK, and here's the thing, somebody else said this. Oh my gosh, are you really going to have blasphemy laws? You have blasphemy laws in the UK. Blasphemy laws where you can't make fun of Muhammad, but you can make fun of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Oh, you can make fun of Jesus all day long, but you can't make fun of Muhammad. Because why? Because Christians aren't terrorists, and they're not going to blow people up and run people over. But you're afraid that the Muslims will get upset, like they do all over the world when Muhammad's
It is a classic victim/abuse syndrome.
Right.
You don't do the thing that you know that the abuser will react to. You just don't, because then they might hurt everyone and drive cars into people.
Last year, it was reported that at least 400 former ISIS fighters had returned to Britain. I read how one British solicitor said that they would lose an entire generation of young men if they didn't allow jihadis to return.
Oh, really?
However, UK officials like Max Hill weren't too concerned about the large number of terrorists coming back to the homeland. The authorities have looked at them hard and have decided they do not justify prosecution. And they're just naive youngsters. Well, Lauren Southern's 22. She's not a naive youngster. His bigger concern was that the UK would lose a generation by not welcoming back these jihadis. Not that the reintegration would jeopardize the safety of the British people. Plans for reintegrating these jihadis include giving the returnees free housing and other government assistance, a far cry from the harsh scrutiny assigned to journalists who were just wanted to interview a critic of Islam, Tommy Robinson. The ISIS returnees add to another problem that is far more serious than the cheeky Allah is queer pamphlets.
Yeah.
The UK is estimated they have 23,000 Islamic extremists living in the country.
Extremists? Hang on, no, stop though. Wait a minute. We're not just talking about Muslims. We are talking about Islamic extremists. 23,000 ticking time bombs that could go off like that. And that, my friend, is it's not really the whole reason why they don't want these people out there exposing the truth. It's not just because they're afraid that they're going to rustle up this nest of hornets. They actually want the hornets to be there.
2017 was a deadly year for Britain. Deadly year. Multiple car attacks, a suicide bomb targeting young girls leaving the Ariana Grande concert. Instead of looking at ways to restrict possible extremists from entering the country, British officials vowed to go after internet speech as their top priority. They have already put in jail 3,395 people for comments made on the internet.
And yet you couldn't stop the bomber at the Ariana Grande concert. You couldn't have stopped the guy that drove his car onto London Bridge when he entered the country and told you that he wanted to hurt people, that he was pretty much an Islamic terrorist.
Right.
That he pretty much admitted it. I'm coming to this country, I want to hurt people. You let him in, but yet you don't have the resources to deal with those kinds of people, but you have the resources to address 3,000 social media posts.
So we want to cover this next topic because everybody kept saying, did you hear about Tommy Robinson punching this guy in Italy?
Clocks. Pretty good.
I listened to Alex Jones for 4 hours. He kept promising we'd get to Tommy. He finally did, like fourth hour.
Hang on, pause.
What?
I wanted to tell them what you said the other day. The difference between us and Alex Jones, and I love Alex Jones. We listen to him and we watch him.
A few more news stories.
He's so used to radio, right? Where you got to keep people stretching out for those 4 hours. When you guys come here to Resistance Chicks, we try to jam pack as much information in here as possible.
And I love you, Alex, to death. But I gotta tell you, he said, now we have more news in 2 days than we did in the past in a year. Then tell people
the news.
Well, that's great.
Owen Schroyer does a really good job of that.
Yeah, Alex,
it's not radio as much as it is just getting this stuff. You don't have to carry things on for like ever.
Right. There's plenty to talk about.
That's right.
So he has Tommy on. Tommy goes to Italy. He's going to explain to you why he goes to a specific part of Italy. What you don't see in this 4-minute clip is that the communist Kurds have teamed with these weird liberal commies in Italy, anti-fascist. Now, just so you know, Antifa or anti-fascist just means anybody who's anti-communist.
Right.
That's what that means. When you see Antifa signs or anti-fascist, they're not against fascism. They're not against Nazism. They're not against totalitarianism. They're just against anyone who is not communist. And I guess about 100 of them were training at a mosque, a Kurdish mosque, right around the corner from where this happened.
Don't touch that, you get no, not get it.
Whilst I was in Rome to cover the Italian election, I came across a video online of a reporter being attacked by migrants live on air, not far from where I was staying.
Look at this reporter who's brave to go into these no-go zones.
Molti di loro provengono dall'Africa centrale,
Many of them
dalla zona del Maghreb,
from Central Africa.
un po' con loro. Quasi tutti sono stanziali.
They're all staying here in the Central Terminal. Tomorrow morning they will collect their covers, recover their cardboard,
I loro cartoni e
and
torneranno
return again to
nuovamente
sleep
qui
another
a
night.
dormire ancora una volta.
And because their hope is especially to reach Milan
soprattutto Milano e altre città del nord
and other cities in the north and then move to Northern Europe. We don't want to disturb them further because it's important to know that this reception,
and then she gets attacked.
Siamo stati aggrediti.
we've been assaulted.
Che succede,
What's happening,
Francesca?
Francesca?
Ci
They
hanno
assaulted us.
aggrediti, Nicola.
Beh, ma tu
Get out
vattene
of there,
via, non te ne
Nicola, non so se
preoccupare.
mi senti, ci hanno
They assaulted
aggrediti.
us.
Francesca,
Francesca, what do you do? What do you
She
do?
said, "What do you want? You're crazy." And then she starts
The
screaming.
blatantcy of this attack shocked me. I decided to start digging deeper into Italy's spate of high-profile migrant attacks and found that this was far from the worst. Just in December, a Somali migrant dressed as a nurse, he snuck into a hospital and he attempted to rape a woman who was giving labour.
Insanity.
The same year, a Polish tourist was gang raped on a beach in Verona while her partner was beaten and forced to watch. Think about that. It's horror stories. In 2018, an 18-year-old woman was killed by a Nigerian migrant and her dismembered body stuffed into suitcases. That just happened months ago. Even just this year again, just minutes from where the journalist was attacked, a 75-year-old German woman was raped in a park. So I went to go see for myself. I went to the areas I was warned not to go to as a journalist. I wanted to find out what was going on there. We'd only been in the area for a mere minutes when the migrants hanging around began to notice the camera. One of them even going for my cameraman.
You cannot.
Clearly they didn't want anyone filming.
No, now get that. Don't touch the camera. I'll get him. I'll put you to sleep.
Get the fuck away from the camera. The fuck away from the camera. You tried to touch your camera. Yes, don't fucking try and touch the camera then. I told you that 5 times.
keep your life.
I'm not keeping my life. You're not going to take my life. Well, you think you're going to take my fucking life? Take my fucking life.
Go ahead.
I'll get me 5
And you cannot, you cannot.
You see that?
And you cannot,
One way this is going to go, you're going to end up knocked down unconscious.
I can bring the cars of
He said they're going to kill you.
Yeah, he literally comes in this menacing. So he did, like, at the corner of Tommy's eye, the guy does this. Okay, now he actually doesn't go to hit him, but Tommy had it's on video. He has every reason to then turn around and block the guy because it looks like he's coming after him, and he did get into his space.
At the exact same spot, a female journalist was dragged down the street live on air. A group of migrants would attempt to attack my cameraman, threatening to kill me. The video of the journalist being dragged down the street is nearly 2 years old, but clearly it's not a one-off, and things in Italy obviously haven't improved. These kind of crimes taking place across Europe are beginning to resemble those that are more commonplace in places like the Middle East and South Africa. Given the kind of violence involved, the readiness in which these migrants will attack, it really isn't surprising that Italy has just voted to remove the politicians who brought this upon their own country.
So there's the attack there. I guess his camera lady, young woman, gave as good as she got. She got beat up, and you know, it's pretty intense, and you're not allowed to talk about it. But we are going to talk about it. We're going to talk about, and if we have a little time, we're going to talk about the truth of broken Britain with Paul Joseph Watson. But we're going to go over here to Nigel Farage.
I love in the comments, right? a lot of you guys had already seen that video, and they're like, "Wait for it, here it comes." That was really great.
So this is City Cons London, where everything is quiet and peaceful. There are no special occurrences. Actually, it is as usual. Now I want to show you this. There's police just watching it.
Now, I do know that here in the United States, disturbing the peace is kind of illegal, right? Like, that's annoying. They can come and tell you to turn your radio off if it's too loud and your neighbors don't like it.
Police are pedophile! The police are sex offenders!
The police are the kafar. The police are sex offenders.
Police are pedophiles!
The police are pedophiles.
The
That's a classic case of what you accuse someone else of.
Sex offenders! Yeah.
The police are sex offenders.
So that guy is not. I don't think he was arrested, from what I understand. So there's a couple things with Nigel Farage. Let me play for you first his. And I don't even think I have it up.
Is she still hungry? She had 2 bowls of wet food.
I think she might still be hungry, actually.
You want me to get her more wet food?
Sure, you can, just a little bit. I'm going to play for you first Nigel Farage and his Prager University video that he did. I love these Prager University videos, and I'm actually so excited to see them tap Nigel Farage for this. So without further ado, Nigel.
If one big government is bad, imagine how much worse 2 big governments would be. But that's what people living in Europe have to deal with. Their own nation's bloated government and the supranational government of Europe, now known as the European Union. Bureaucracy times 2. How's that for a horror show? Well, actually, you've no idea. It's worse than you think. Believe me, I know, because for 17 years, I've represented South East England as a member of the European Parliament, the EU's legislative body. I was also leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, where I led Britain's effort to leave the European Union. To their everlasting credit, that's just what happened on June 23rd, 2016. The United Kingdom left the European Union. The world knows it as Brexit. Brexit is a statement of national sovereignty. Don't misunderstand me. I like nations, I like borders. I like the people that live within those borders, making their own laws. But I don't like it when faceless bureaucrats make laws for nations they don't even live in. But that's what they do in the European Union. Imagine a Belgian telling a Brit how much he can charge his customers, or the reverse. The EU bureaucrats do this in a myriad of different ways, all day, every day. It is a conspiracy of the elites. Who are those elites? Well, they're a bunch of self-important, overpaid social engineers with useless college degrees who have never done a proper day's work in their lives and have no connection with ordinary, decent people. I'll take the good sense of an Italian farmer or a French baker over the arid intellectualism of an EU bureaucrat any day.
Me too, Nigel.
And I say these things not as an anti-European. I love Europe. It's a fantastic, exciting, great continent. Different peoples, languages and cultures. But these peoples, with their languages and cultures, have effectively been hijacked by a giant, ever-expanding bureaucracy, the European Union. People will say, but isn't there a parliament, a European parliament that represents the people of Europe? Well, yes, but this body has got no real power. It can't make its own laws. Rather, the power resides with the European Commission. They're unelected and they can't be removed. And that's how absurd the whole thing is. The European Parliament meets in Brussels. At least that's what I thought when I was elected there. But once a month, do you know what happens? They load the contents of our offices and papers into big plastic trunks. And they put those trunks on lorries. And they drive them nearly 400 miles down Europe's motorways to a French city called Strasbourg, where for 4 days, the contents of our office and our papers are put into a new office, and the Parliament then sits there. 12 times a year, this back and forth happens, and this from an organisation who say they want to reduce their level of carbon footprint. This from an organisation whose accounts have not been given a clean bill of health by the auditors for the last 20 years. This, a parliament, it's more like a travelling circus. Now, all of Europe knows that it's costing nearly 300 million euros every year to move us back and forth from Brussels to Strasbourg. So why isn't it reformed? Well, the way the EU's been structured, to change that would require changing the treaties. And to change the treaties would need all 28 member governments to agree not to go to Strasbourg 12 times a year. And you know something? The French are never going to agree to that because it's in their economic interests for the travelling circus to go to Strasbourg. And it shows you that a system of lawmaking has been devised where not only can the voters not change anything, but the institutions themselves are pretty much incapable of reform. Unfortunately, this is no laughing matter. Let me give you an example my countrymen know only too well. The United Kingdom is an island. It's surrounded by the sea. And yet, as members of the European Union, we were only allowed to catch 20% of the fish swimming in territorial British waters. What that meant were tens of thousands of jobs lost in Britain's coastal communities as we effectively gave away the ability to look after one of our greatest resources to a bureaucracy based in Brussels. No wonder we left the EU. Again, I have nothing against Europe, quite the opposite. I want good relations between all the European nations. I want prosperous, free and fair trade between those nations. But I'll be damned if I'm going to give up my rights as a British citizen so that some Eurocrat can tell me how to live. I won't do it, and I'm certain that across the continent, ultimately, the French and the Italians won't put up with it either. I'm Nigel Farage for Prager University.
Well done.
I love him so much.
All right, let's move on to some
Well
rather,
done, Nigel.
Horrid news that Nigel was talking about. I'm going to play this little clip here.
Did that one already, all the banging.
I really hope that this Telford story gets bigger over the course of the next few days and we start to have an open, honest debate about the appalling things that have happened in this country. Because the reason no one wants to talk about it is the fact is it is the fault of successive governments in this country that have allowed this to happen. And that's the debate they don't want.
That's the debate they don't want. Now, what is he talking about? We talked about it. It was breaking on Sunday. Another huge... It all sounds the same. That's what makes it so awful.
It's desensitizing.
Because,
because
isn't this just what we talked about before? When there's another gang of sex abusers going before the judge, isn't that the one we just heard about? Isn't that just, it's like all meshes together to one incident.
But what's really interesting is the only reason that we are hearing about it, the only reason that you guys are hearing about it is because we are searching for the truth. But the fact of the matter remains that while the rest of the world and the BBC and CNN and MSNBC are going Trump, Russia still, even though it's been proven false, they're still doing that when this is actual real news that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. And that's why we're not hearing about it, because then change would have to be made.
So the BBC is their government-run television network. Now, they buried this story because they don't want to talk about it.
Nope.
And we are going to talk about it. And I got to do it in a way that doesn't make me angry at these people.
I don't know if that's
the
possible.
BBC finally reported on the story, buried low down on their website between a story about Crufts and a council grant. Activists disrupt Crufts grand final. Call for inquiry into sex abuse claims. Not Muslim, not Islamic, not gang rapes. Not another town hit by Muslim gang rape. No, it just says sex abuse claims. That could mean anything.
But in the United States, we know that the Mormons and the Amish have been known for having some sexual abuse within their communities.
Right.
If this exact same thing had happened within a Mormon or an Amish community, even the BBC
all the time.
would have reported it, and it would have said Mormon sex abuse claims or Amish sex abuse claims. Why? Because it makes it sound more sensational.
Right.
Okay. But the Mormons and the Amish are not going out into other communities,
Right.
and bringing people in. You know what I mean? Well, the Mormons totally are. I have to take that back. But you know what I mean, and that's the extremist of the Mormons. But still, the point is,
and you know what? Other Mormons condemn their extremism,
and they decry
and
it.
Christians can decry the polygamy,
but
and
these Muslims
the
aren't.
cults, and we say that's a cult, like over and over again.
Exactly.
Islamists don't do that.
Right.
We're all appalled when we see that.
And if it had said Amish or Mormon, they wouldn't be differentiating between the fact that this is extreme, this is not something that most Amish do or most Mormon do or whatever. So I'm just saying there's such a double standard here. It makes me mad.
It's just been revealed that there's potentially Britain's biggest ever industrial scale child abuse scandal in Telford, with around 1,000 girls reportedly drugged,
ever,
raped, and or sexually abused over a 40-year period. The reports pointed to young girls once again being let down across the board, with those working for the local council viewing abused children as just simply prostitutes. 14 and 15-year-olds, just prostitutes getting morning after pills. Nobody's questioning. That's when you have this crazy sexual society where you have pedophiles who think it's normal for 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds to be having sex,
right,
and to be getting the morning after pill all the time.
Right.
They don't even question, hey, what's going on in your life, right? There was also the unusual politically correct nonsense when it comes to the abusers who were Asian. But what does the BBC do to cover up the story? Well, absolutely nothing, of course. To cover the story, absolutely nothing, of course. Here's the Beebs homepage, no mention of Telford, but crucially, it does manage to remind readers to feed the birds. Right here.
Right. Yeah.
That's the front page. Nothing on Telford, but make sure you feed the birds.
Wow.
Surely this is just a minor oversight. Well, no, because it doesn't even show up if you dig through the BBC's More News section. It doesn't show up if you actually type the word Telford into the search bar.
Wow.
Or if you type the name of the area's local MP, Lucy Allen.
Like, so what says Asian as usual? That's what they're calling
In fact,
them.
the only mention of potentially the largest ever child abuse scandal. Imagine if this was part of like a Billy Graham. If it was under Billy Graham's church, and all
or
these
the
pastors
Catholic Church
were involved. They always report on the Catholic abuse, like heavily.
Yeah.
You know, ever to take place on British soil can seemingly. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to bounce back and forth, but it's because of the BBC. We do know about like
Jimmy Savile,
or thousands of babies buried next to Catholic churches who were aborted in Ireland who were in abuse scandals that we keep hearing about.
Right.
The BBC's all over the Catholic abuse scandals. They can seemingly throw away line by searching Telford BBC directly into Google, and then it makes no reference to the true scale of the problem whatsoever. Now, why would the BBC not really cover this story? This is monumental news, a serious scandal. UK's worst grooming gang scandal, Telford whistleblowers punished, silenced, and lost jobs.
Wow.
This is from today. A police chaplain and a charity worker were forced out of their jobs and silenced after trying to raise the alarm about the grooming and the rape gangs operating in the town of Telford. Around 1,000 victims were caught up in the scandal, which could be the worst in the UK history, with the gangs operating for 40 years, drugging, beating, trafficking, and raping non-Muslim girls, some as young as 11. 3 girls were murdered, and 2 others died following incidents linked to the abuse. Others were left addicted to the drugs and scarred for life. And we didn't hear, and you in the UK didn't hear about the poor girls who were burned in their home. Why didn't you hear about this house fire? And these young girls burned their home. Many of the underage victims were considered prostitutes by the authorities, and when concerned citizens attempted to blow the whistle, they were targeted in the workplace, and one even lost her job. A woman working for the sex abuse charity Access Counselling, based in Shrewsbury, was forced to leave her role when she tried to speak out. And this, you saw this in the Girls Speak Out documentary, where that one woman was silenced over and over again. Where you learn? The charity was funded by the police, the Mirror reports, and allegedly feared losing money. Wow. Keith Osmond Smith, a police chaplain, was suspended after he passed papers to the newspaper, and a report commissioned by the council revealed social workers knew of the sex crimes in 2000 and earlier.
A government report in the Rotherham grooming scandal found that political correctness, a culture of fear and intimidation, and concerns about accusations of racism. It's not racism you're afraid of.
Three
Stop
Girls
it
was its
with
title.
the racism.
Says Brett
You're
Bozza.
afraid of appearing to call out Muslims because you're afraid of being stung by the hornets.
Yeah.
You're not afraid of anything but those hornets blowing your car up, killing your wife and kids.
Yeah.
That's what you're afraid of. You're afraid that Muslims will come after you if you call them out for what they've done.
They will, and that's
because
the problem.
they will. Exactly. Muslim gangs get away with their crimes for so long. Sarah Champion, Rochdale, Peterborough, Oxford, Rotherham, Newcastle, Newham, Telford, and many, many more. Thousands of victims. Where is the government support to help them rebuild their lives after we let them down? You didn't just let them down. You are a co-conspirator. Police, politicians, you encourage it. You
God
encourage
will hold
it.
you accountable.
You are part of it.
Secretarian says calling them Asian puts the story into the fake news category. They are not Asian. They are Middle Eastern, at least unless from some other area.
Well, here's the thing. What they've done is they've called like Afghanistan and Pakistan like
But
Asian.
they do it on purpose, though.
It's weird. Yeah, I know. Let's see.
3 off.
West Mercia Police. West Mercia Police is working with partners to raise awareness of sexual exploitation so that the signs can be recognized and tackled earlier. A little bit earlier than 40 years. 39 years, 364 days.
And maybe 1,000 girls earlier.
Following the Telford reports, UKIP announced it will be pressuring the government to act on grooming gangs and protect the tens and thousands of innocent child victims, almost entirely white or Sikh, in cities across the length and breadth of these islands. Following the revelations of 40 years of child abuse carried out by rape gangs in Telford, the party said in a statement Monday, the leader of UKIP in the House of Lords, Lord Pearson, will present an oral question to the government on Tuesday, today, about the failures of the authorities to deal with the situation. Gerard Batten, MEP, UKIP's interim leader, commented, "These horror stories of Telford are further evidence that these rape gangs are not local, but a national problem, with new examples being constantly uncovered." Now,
we forgot to get the milk.
But it's snowing, and so it should be okay till the morning.
We get our Amish milk
Get it in the milk.
off.
We will get it in the morning. Yes, we should have picked it up this afternoon. We should have just picked it up.
I just remembered.
I know you did. The cow in your mind. The mayor spoke to the 12 victims about the investigation during the investigation, who accused more than 70 men of grooming in Telford. One 14-year-old said she had fallen pregnant twice and had 2 abortions while being groomed and abused.
Britt Bozza says, I went to my local beach last year, had Islamic people trying to order me around in my own hometown. It didn't go down too well. I told them to bugger off, trying to boss me around in my own hometown.
So not only do they have abuse, but they have murder on their hands, obviously, because of the abortions, right? After my second termination, I was taken by one of my abusers to be raped by more men, right after she was raped. Night after night, and we read this before, she was abused. The taxi driver, I guess there was a taxi driver targeted the young girls in 1997, and she gave birth to his child when she was 14. Mr. Mahmood was jailed for murder, but never arrested or charged with any child sex abuse crimes. And your laws in the UK for child sex abuse are just like,
it's a slap on the wrist.
Go do some community service. It's absolutely insane. Tory MP, BBC not standing up for white working class after ignoring the Telford scandal. Wow. A Tory MP has slammed the BBC for not standing up for the white working class after the corporation was accused of ignoring revelations about the Telford grooming gang scandal. This is Lucy Allen again, who represents the people of Telford, said she was pushing to ask an urgent question in Parliament on Tuesday. If I don't know if I can find that clip. You might be able to find something on Twitter. Maybe I will. I'll look in a second. As well as revealing she will be demanding an inquiry into the scandal, which could be the largest in UK's history. She says, I have asked for an urgent question in Parliament today. It would be today. And she says, yes, we do have a debate on victims. And so let's see if we can find that was sometimes the news is just, happens so fast, right? So give me a second. I'm going to look her up. What was her name? Lucy Allen, right?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
It's going to be the easiest on Twitter because obviously it's not something that anybody else is covering, right? So
let's go for the. Here
Looks
we
like you
go.
got it.
Need to be heard and listened to, and they are the victims, and they need to be heard and listened to and given the protection they need and deserve. And yes, it's an ordeal being questioned, and sometimes it feels to them that they are lying, that they're not being believed, and we have to believe these young people. We have to give them a sense that they will be listened to. And that's why there should not be opposition to finding out the facts, finding out what went wrong. There is a national inquiry going on into child sexual exploitation led by Baroness J. That inquiry is not going to get to the bottom of why these things happened. It's not going to give answers to my constituents in Telford. So I would like to urge the Minister or anybody listening to please put pressure onto the authorities. It's for the good of our community, it's for the good of the victims and their families, because the families are victims too. They feel they failed their children, they feel they've let them down, they suffer because their child has had so many terrible things in some cases happen to them. So we do need to know why, and we do need not to allow these crimes to be minimised. They're not trivial. This isn't some girl with a 35-year-old boyfriend. This is someone who is abused, who is exploited, who is being sold for sex. We should not shy away from it. We should not bury our head in the sand.
Well, I'm glad that she actually covered that, because the whole time I'm watching this, what was going through my mind is this. When you hear the phrase grooming gang, it obviously sounds bad. Okay, this is wrong. When you actually get down to the nitty gritty of what is happening and the reason why nothing is being done is because of these, I don't know, brain damaged people. And I don't know, I know we actually have some viewers that think along these lines, and I don't appreciate you. I have to be honest, not you people, but you all know who you are. That a young girl of the age of 15, let's just go kind of the highest age here, who would prostitute herself, well, she's asking for it.
Right.
She's putting herself in this situation. She's asking for it. If there are people out there that are going to exploit it and use it, well, she put herself in that situation. Right. That's why they're called grooming gangs. There is such a thing as seduction, manipulation, lying, twisting of someone's mind. And you know, it's really easy to do that with young people. That's why they're not allowed to vote. That's why they're not allowed to marry. That's why they're not allowed to do a lot of things, even drive cars, because they're stupid.
I think this is the House of Lords video.
They can be manipulated.
Police officer for child protection, of Rotherham's MP, and of the recent Jay and Quilliam reports, we seem to be looking at millions of rapes of white and Sikh girls by Muslim men, only 222 of whom have been convicted since 2005. So, my lords, will the government ask our Muslim leaders whether the perpetrators can claim that their behaviour is sanctioned in the Quran, and to issue a fatwa against it? And second, my lords, will the government encourage a national debate about the various interpretations of Islam? Can we talk about Islam without being accused of hate crime?
Wow! Yes! Lord, with the lowercase L. I can deal with you. We can work together. I'm not big on...
he called it, and did you hear the murmurs
aristocracy
of the people in the background, like pretty much saying, "How dare you say that? You can't do that."
Of course, that Muhammad
it's not
had
the
sex
Quran.
with a 9-year-old. Is this? I mean, seriously, if you can watch any YouTubes and they sanction this junk, man. They sanction this junk. Just watch YouTubes. I'm like, we live in the Twilight stinking zone. We live in the Twilight
Baza
zone.
says, Michelle, these young girls are given heroin and drugs. Then they get dependent on these gangs. This is seriously overlooked in this crime. And that's it. That is absolutely it. Okay? They are manipulated. They are coerced. They are groomed into these situations. And then once they are in there, they are hooked on drugs. They are stuck in these situations where they get raped brutally.
Right.
Over and over and over again.
They were harassing me constantly.
What does that mean?
So
constantly calling my phone, come and meet us, and they'd be always hanging around where we would be, me and my friend. It's difficult to explain. Basically, they took our phone numbers and then sold them on to older men. And from there, the older men would bombard us constantly with phone calls, and it would be relentless, it would be non-stop.
Saying what? Suggesting what to you in the phone calls?
Just saying, oh, I know you, I've seen you around, come and meet up with us, we'll just go sort of chilling. At first I was like, no, I don't want to. But then after receiving hundreds and hundreds of calls every day, curiosity got the better of me. I went and met one, and at first it was fine. He'd just go and buy us food, top up our mobile phones, things like that. So sort of built a bit of trust, and then he started violently raping me. He'd beat me with his belt and things if I didn't agree to let him rape me. And then he'd try and make me feel better, or make himself feel better, I guess, by trying to give me money or top up my phone and things again. From that man, it moved on to many men. There's about 7 abusers in the end.
So you were passed around, or they would all turn up en masse, or what?
No, it would be almost whoever caught me first, whoever saw me walking home from school first, or walking to my friend's house. Telford's a very small area, so there's nowhere to hide. Like, if somebody knows where you live and your daily routine, they're going to find you. But it quickly moved on to being sold onto men every single day. So I'd be being sold maybe 2 or 3 times a night, taken into the only thing I can describe as a rape house, which was set up for the purpose of young girls being sold to men. And the people that would pay for the girls in Telford, it wasn't just Pakistani men or Bengali men like you've seen across the rest of the country. There was men of every race, religion coming in there and wanting to pay for girls.
So it was run by Pakistani men, and all kinds of men paid for these girls.
If it really was just all kinds of men, this would be top news.
Right.
But the fact that it was ran by the Pakistani men is why it has to be buried.
Right.
What we see is that people in positions of authority, such as police and social workers, don't take these allegations seriously. They blame the victims, and that allows the cover-up and the abuse to carry on for decades.
But we have learned so much in terms of how victims present. Presumably in the future, those in authority would not necessarily treat alleged victims in similar ways to the past?
I would hope so, but I'm very concerned looking at the information that we have so far about the sexual abuse scandal in Telford, that those lessons we should have learned by now don't seem to have trickled down to social workers and to the police. I mean, we're talking about very recent allegations.
And that's what makes me really angry about this, is that they're not taken seriously because they blame the victims.
Right.
They blame the victims because she started out by saying, well, I was curious.
Right.
You know what? Curiosity is not a crime. And it doesn't matter if you are curious and you answer all right, so let's say you meet somebody online and you're a teenager and you go, and because you're curious, and you go and meet this person online, and then they want to have a sexual encounter with you, regardless of how old you are. If you do not want to have that sexual encounter with that person, it is rape. And it is not your fault. Right. Even if you did a really stupid thing by meeting that person, you're still a victim, and they're not taking this seriously.
The Rochdale case 7 years ago now, and I said then that this was the tip of the iceberg, that there were parts of this country.
He prosecuted the Rochdale case 7 years ago.
Rochdale?
He said it was the tip of the iceberg.
Where this type of model of sexual abuse was taking place. The authorities hadn't recognized it, that they lifted up the stone, they would see it. I prosecuted, when I led nationally, I prosecuted the Telford original prosecution. I knew then that this was a bigger issue, not just in Telford, but everywhere. But I still, 7-8 years on, see stories like Holly's, where she's not being listened to, she's not being believed, her abusers have gained some, almost acted with impunity because they realise the authorities aren't going to do anything about it. And she is one of probably thousands of young girls and young boys who are being abused in street grooming up and down the country. And I'm pretty sure, Victoria, wherever you look, you will find.
Wherever you look, you will find. So what are some of your thoughts? I mean, it's...
Tawana Lynn wants them to be able to defend themselves. Gun, knife, mace, acid, let them protect themselves.
I do too. That's, yeah, give them a gun. So the Sikhs, I'm looking through some of these videos on Twitter. I guess the Sikhs are pretty upset. There's a couple
Gary
videos.
says, buy your women a gun for Mother's Day here in the United States. Obviously, that's not going to work in the UK.
So, I had a couple more.
A woman says a woman from the UK said she did not know anything about these grooming gangs. She's in her 60s. I could not believe it.
Wow. Just ostriches with their head in the ground. For real. I have one more kind of Donald Trump and Nigel here. I think I'm going to maybe save it for later. It's getting, well, it's going to add another, well, okay.
A lot of us came from the European Union, different countries, right? Sounds nice. They kill us on trade. They have trade barriers. We can't even sell our farming goods in there. I said, good. Open up the barriers and get rid of your tariffs. And if you don't do that, we're going to tax Mercedes-Benz. We're going to tax BMW. So when I said that, all of a sudden it's like, whoa. But all those countries got together in order to do well on trade with the United States. People don't know that. You know, you hear European Union, sounds so, the European Union sounds so innocent. It's not innocent. It was $100 billion a year. They sell stuff into us. We charge them practically nothing.
That was President Trump last night in Pennsylvania. We're going to bring in now Nigel Farage, former UK Independence Party leader and Fox News contributor. You know, Nigel, a lot of the president's critics have said his views on tariffs are going to hurt him. You heard a lot of the same things on Brexit, that if you Brexit, your ability to trade will be undercut. What do you say about the comparisons?
Well, absolutely. I mean, thank goodness at last a world leader is calling out the European Union. Look, when Trump announced 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum as tariffs, the European Union were the loudest critics in the world saying how dreadful it was. Without telling anybody, they'd already put tariffs on aluminum and on steel and on virtually every American product that comes into Europe. So they're guilty, the European Union, of absolute gross hypocrisy. They really, really are. And look, once again, President Trump is doing what he told the American electorate he would do during the election campaign. That is called democracy.
Nigel, I read some of the European press, the British press, okay, admittedly some Daily Mail, but I will say this, when I read the comment section, not necessarily the articles, but the comment section, it seems like a lot of Europeans are saying, hey, I wish we had someone like Trump, you know, in our country doing things like
you
this,
guys say that to
having
us all
this
the
kind of
time.
success. So the elites maybe have a different opinion of him. The people, what do you say?
Well, look, you see, Brexit, Trump, the election results in Italy last week, they're all part of the same phenomenon. You know, we're all part of a movement against what has happened over the last 2 or 3 decades, which is kind of the victory of bureaucracy over democracy. Countries selling out to higher supranational institutions, having foreign courts making decisions for them. So we're all part of this same phenomenon. And I think in my country particularly, what people are absolutely crying out for is firm, strong leadership. And, you know, whether you like Donald Trump as a person, whether you find his style a bit brash, frankly isn't the point. Firstly, he does what he'll say he do. And secondly, through strong leadership, he gets things done. You know, if I'd said to you a month ago, there was a genuine prospect of Trump meeting the North Korean boss, Kim Jong-un, you know, you'd have asked me where I got this fantasy idea from. And yet Trump's the president making it happen. So, you know, The newspaper editorials can say what they like.
Yeah.
They can be skeptical about this meeting with North Korea. But I think the people in my country and across Europe are getting used to Donald Trump, and they now realise this is a guy of real...
North Korea's even saying, if you put an embassy here, we'll release some United States prisoners. I think that's a decent trade-off, man.
Wow.
Release them all.
Nigel, to your point on North Korea, when months ago Donald Trump started giving out the nicknames and Rocket Man and tweeting and saying before the TV cameras, you're going to get fire and fury if you go after Guam or any piece of America, the mainstream media here in the U.S. and some around the world said, this is absurd, he's going to start World War III. To your point, that doesn't look like it. Now look at these headlines. New York Times, word of Trump-Kim summit meeting stirs concern in Asia. BBC, Trump and North Korea talks, the political gamble of the 21st century. And CNN, finally, the week Trump rewarded enemies and punished friends. Before it was he's starting World War III. Now he's trying to get to the peace table, and they're still not happy.
Yeah, I remember, I'm old enough to remember Ronald Reagan and all those same newspapers, all those same media outlets saying Reagan was an idiot, he wasn't fit to be US president. And then the big Reykjavik summit that he had with Soviet Russia, Star Wars, America winning the Cold War, the Berlin Wall coming down, tens of millions of people living in freedom, liberty and democracy, and still those media organizations would never credit Ronald Reagan with anything. And I think right now, if Donald Trump, invented a cure for the common cold, they would still find a reason to criticize him.
He put the cancer industry out of business. Look at that.
That's true. That's exactly what they would say.
One more video for you guys.
Per il gruppo Europa della Libertà e della Democrazia Diretta, la parola onorevole Farage.
Thank you. Two-thirds of the British people think the European Commission are trying to bully us in these negotiations. And of course, they're right. The EU's bullying us. It bullies member states. It bullies its next-door neighbours. It even bullies the third world with its neo-colonial policies. Well, of course it does, because the Europe of the Junckers, the Barniers, the Selmayrs is power without accountability. Well, at long last, you've met your match in Donald Trump. Now, you may well scream and shout about his aluminium and steel tariffs, but the EU puts tariffs on 13,000 goods coming into it, meaning that shoes and bras and food are more expensive for simple, ordinary folk who don't understand this, because it's never been properly explained to them. And the sheer hypocrisy of criticising Trump when you already...
That's because you spend $300 million a year just toting your little offices back and forth to France.
But it's totally okay for what he's saying is it's totally okay for the European Union to impose tariffs on things like what we're importing, but we can't.
The hypocrisy you could cut with a knife.
Have put tariffs on steel and aluminium amazes me, but it does show the folly of us going for a transition period. It shows the utter stupidity of the Labour Party wanting to sign us up to this permanently, because in this USA dispute, we now find ourselves trapped, impotent, unable to act. We need to be free. We voted Brexit. We voted to make our own trade policy, our own trade decisions. We could do a deal with America in 48 hours. We need to act. Yes, well, just yesterday, the Trump administration were describing us as their best ally in...
Oh, did you hear that? Everybody in the background. No, you couldn't do a trade deal. Maybe 48 years.
The world. Mrs. May, we did not vote for a transition period. We voted to leave this organisation. We voted to leave the customs union. We voted to leave the single market. So please, Mrs. May, at this summit next week, do what Trump has done. Stand strong against the European Commission, against the unelected bullies. And bearing in mind the Italian elections, and weren't they wonderful, folks? It's pretty obvious the game is up anyway, so she'll be doing not just the British people a favour, but the whole of Europe too.
I want you to watch the guy in the
Union,
background.
we voted to leave the single market. So please, Mrs. May, at this summit next week, do what Trump has done. Stand strong against the European Commission, against the unelected bullies. And bearing in mind the Italian elections, and weren't they wonderful, folks? It's pretty obvious the game is up anyway, So she'll be doing not just the British people a favour, but the whole of Europe too.
Oh, I love my life. Oh my gosh. That's so great.
What would we do if Nigel's not in the European Parliament anymore? It's like
I'm
watching
kinda
a boxing
sad
match
about
that
it.
you don't have to see people lose their front teeth and walk around like this, you know, and
So
be like
right.
mentally messed up. So like, I don't
David
want it to
Coburn
be
behind
over.
Nige, Jim West says.
I don't want it to be over. Watching Nigel in the European Parliament is like,
these videos are going to become classics when you guys leave. Because there won't be any more Nige in the European Parliament. But you know what? I believe at that point he'll be back in the UK Parliament. That's my prediction. And we'll get to hear his speeches then.
oh,
Maybe as
please, Jesus.
Prime Minister.
I need to continue to hear him speaking against his enemies.
Yeah.
Because that's when he shines with wit and humor and poignant facts. It just hits right into the heart. And he puts his knife in and doesn't even realize. It's just like, bam. He's like a little secret spy. You know? He's like a double agent. He's like
Secretary
007.
says every country needs a Trump-Farage duo. Eric Mathis says, love him.
I can't say enough about Nigel Farage. He makes my day. Every time he makes me laugh. He makes me smile and he hits the points. He's so intelligent. But I'm glad we ended on that.
Did you just see Junker's face there? Just like...
I think he drinks like a whole bottle of scotch before he goes in there. So he doesn't have to like listen. All right, guys. We got to round this up. It's
really
late.
late. Oh.
Please like,
comment,
and subscribe
to both Mass Faith 3 and Resistance Chicks. Ring that bell for notifications.
Find us on Facebook.
Resistance Chicks on Facebook. Find us on Twitter. We go live every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, here's the thing.
To cover UK and Euro news usually. Like 99% of the time.
In the United States, we've had daylight savings.
Right.
Which means when we go live at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays, that's at 11 p.m. normally for you guys in the UK. All right, 5 hours difference. But because we've just now switched over, as of this weekend, it'll be 10 p.m. this week. Same thing for Sunday. It would normally be 6 p.m. in the UK. It will be 5 p.m. in the UK until you guys have daylight savings on the 25th of March. I can't speak for any of the other countries. No idea what you guys do. You'll just have to figure it out. I have no idea. Gary, yes, we got your present. We haven't opened it. We're going to do a birthday mail call this Friday. Because there's a couple of packages that people have told me that they have sent that haven't gotten here yet. Leah just went to let the dog out.
We probably won't go live tomorrow because we've got 2 interviews tomorrow.
We do have 2 interviews tomorrow, not live, but we're going to be doing another interview with Make Poland Great Again, aka IPP TV in Poland. That will be taking place in the morning. I don't know when they're going to edit it, or I think it's afternoon. And then we're going to be doing an interview that's pre-recorded with John B. Wells, Caravan to Midnight. Here's the thing about...
We're supposed to be tonight. It's going to be tomorrow.
Which is why you got a show tonight.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of news. It's at 10 p.m. Central Time, which is 11 p.m. our time. But
we'll make it happen. We will make it happen, baby.
That's right.
We'll just...
which technically means we could do a show with you guys, but I think our voices would be raw at that point. So let's just, you know what, we're just going to take that
we just packed in a lot for you guys tonight. It was a really newsy day.
Britt, yes, we got your package as well. We got Gary's and we got yours. We got a couple of cards. I say it was for Leah. Is Sydney feeling better?
Yes, thank you. She's
Robert
feeling so much better, and they took the thing out of her tongue, and it's not cancer. So we're
Robert,
good.
that
Praise
CD is absolutely awesome.
Very
we listen
calming,
to it. It's very peaceful. There's
very peaceful.
animals throughout and music that goes perfectly with the different animals. It's really, really enjoyable.
Donald,
can you share your?
We've been using this.
We've been using this. Eric Donald.
Sydney's got to go out now,
why don't we just call him Busky? The
Busky,
last name
baby.
is Busky.
I think Sydney needs to go out. I ain't got no shoes on, girl.
What is happening?
Here.
She busted out the door. Can you share your Poland interviews? Yes. We will share them on Facebook. We will share them on Twitter. We don't want to just take and download their video because we want you guys to go and watch it there, but we will tell you how to find it, and we will tell you about it.
Come here, Sid.
Which we've already done an interview with the Polish, and we shared that video. Maybe we'll link to both of those, but you can easily go to their channel. It's just put in the search box, Make Poland Great Again, and you'll see our video and our last interview with them there. So, all right, remember, it's not just a conspiracy theory. if it's the truth. As far as the interview with John B. Wells, I think in order to listen to the Caravan to Midnight, you have to be a member and subscribe, I think, to them. So if you guys want to watch and listen to that interview, and I would highly encourage you, I know you guys want to support Leah and I on our channel, and you want to send money, and we always say no. If y'all got that extra money, then listen to John B. Wells. His show is amazing. So, all right, that's going to round us off for right now. I'm going to sign off, and we're going to say adios. Thank you for being here. We love you guys. We'll see you back probably Thursday, but for sure on Friday. Good night, guys.
I was cold.